Hold on, hold on. Haha. That might work, Jens. I think I may have just fixed it. Yeah, no, Cipher Enigma, great point. Absolutely. I may have just fixed it, Jens. May have been operator error. Unknown yet. We'll see. Tell me if it works. Might be operator error. It's been so long since I streamed, I forgot how to use my own shit. Anyway, Cipher Enigma, yeah, post assigned. Like, so you're on a red team engagement, right? You're on a red team engagement. So he says, post assigned, we'll be performing a security upgrade. Please make sure you leave your workstation unlocked tonight. Hey, it's working now. My bad, y'all. So for some reason, Jens, when I turned it on go live on vMix, for some reason, it didn't actually hit the go live button on YouTube. Not sure why that happened. That's super odd. It's never actually done that before on YouTube. So I'm not sure if YouTube changed their process or not, but it is what it is. So anyway, Cipher Enigma, great point. So I'll give you an example of this, right? I was doing a physical pen test at a hospital one time. And they had construction. I mean, listen, like, hospitals are the worst. Like, anybody who's an aspiring pen tester, anybody who's done any pen testing work, anybody who's been physical penetration testing, hospitals are hands down the worst. They have the worst security. Why? Think about it. A hospital lets anybody in at any point in time to literally do anything. Right? I mean, they're meant to be relatively open in that regard, right? And so hospitals probably have the worst security ever. Like, I don't care what you see about badging or, the folks at the counter. Hospitals, hands down, in my experience, the worst security of almost, I mean, I'll tell you some scary stories about some, water treatment facility plants where they're not too far off, but hospitals are definitely pretty bad. Yeah, they're busy dealing with people versus worried about security, and rightfully so. Like, I want my hospital to be, to be worried about the people that they're taking care of. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But, at the same time, if you can't protect the people. Anyway, so I'm in this hospital doing this pen test. Part of, like, part of this physical pen test is really, it's interacting with people. And so, like, I'm carrying around a backpack. I've got my laptop in my hand, right? And I mean, I intentionally carry my laptop. Anybody notice my golf coasters, right? I intentionally carry my laptop so all my hacker stickers, right, are basically facing the person that I'm talking to. Right? And so it's got, like, DEF CON, and at this time I had this big, huge black and white hacker sticker right in the center, right? Tons of stuff like that. And I walk up to this lovely young person, and I said, "Hey, my name's Neal. I'm from IT, and I'm getting some weird signals coming from your computer about your user account. Are you seeing anything weird?" Now, what person who is non-IT educated, when asked if they see anything weird about their computer, isn't just going to vomit every weird thing that's happened in the last 7 days about their computer to you right there on the spot? And so I listened to this woman tell me everything that was wrong with her computer. Like, yes, as a matter of fact, it's been running slow, and I had some weird issues with this, and blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, that tracks with what we're seeing. Listen, I need to check your account. Can you do me a favor and write your username and password down on this sticky note? And I'll just sit right over here in this station over here, and I'll log on really quick and see if I can't figure out what's going on with your account. And I kid you not, she pulls out a sticky note, writes that stuff on a sticky note, and hands it to me. Just like that. And that's not a one-off case. Like, I went through this hospital and did this to multiple people around the hospital. You know why? Because they don't know who's in their IT department. They just know, yeah, I'm yet another nerdy schmuck coming in from IT to try to fix their problem. And so, like, that is, like, social engineering is information warfare, right? Like at the heart of it, like if you want a good study topic is to go study IO, information operations, information warfare, IW, right? Military IW. That is like, that stuff is legit, and it's the basis. I would argue it is the fundamentals of social engineering. I've got lots of fun physical. I absolutely love physical pen testing, and I didn't get into it the traditional way, right? When I got into, so the way that I got into physical pen testing, this dates back to like when I was stationed in Korea. So I was in Korea in 2004 to 2005 was when I was in Korea. This was still relatively early in the days of cyber. As a matter of fact, we didn't really have a career field called cyber at the time. Gonzo, you might this might inadvertently answer your question, even though you're asking it mid story. But this was like early days of cyber, and when I was in Korea, obviously one of the biggest tabletop exercises that we run in Korea is what happens when the North attacks the South. Like that is hands down the biggest tabletop scenario that is run in Korea, right? It runs. Callie, keep me honest, you probably know better than I do. At least twice a year, there are two major exercises that simulate, North Korean attack in South Korea. To help facilitate that, there is a team called Op4. As a matter of fact, oh, cool, you can kind of see it, right? This little flag, whoops, right here, Op4, right? This is opposition forces. This is from my days in Korea. It stands for opposition forces. It's an invite-only team. You have to try out for it. There's only one team that does the entire Korean peninsula, and they run out of Camp Humphreys. And it's run by the combat communications unit that I was attached to down there at Camp Humphreys. And our goal as Op4, as you can tell, opposition forces, it was to red team military bases and military exercises. So this is early days of physical pen testing, right? This is like, doing it military style. And so we would go to these exercises. We would go to these military, exercises that were happening on the peninsula. And our goal was to pretend to be North Korean, soldiers and infiltrators and spies to try to break into U.S. Air Force installations. And so we studied, the TTPs of the North Korean military. We studied TTPs in North Korean espionage campaigns, all those types of things like that. And we would go to various places and basically try to break into them. I'll give you an example. During one of the peninsula-wide, exercises, they loaded us up into a van. There were about 4 of us. We were representing a special strike unit. That our mission in this particular case during this exercise was, if you've never been to Korea, I'm going to try to paint this picture for you. When you drive in the front gate, or at least the front gate that was the front gate when I was there, right? And you look off to the right-hand side where the airfield is, you'll see this line of Patriot batteries, right, pointed to the north, right, for obvious reasons, to run intercept on any missiles that would come from North Korea. And so our mission objective was they were going to drive us out 10 or 15 miles from the airbase, and we had to covertly, at night, traverse through the entire city leading up to Osan Air Base, breach the fence line at Osan Air Base, and plant a simulated bomb on a Patriot missile battery during the exercise. And so that's what the 4 of us did. Was they drove us out. We stealthily hiked 10 plus miles to get to the fence line of Osan Air Base, and like the last like mile, Callie was in a benjo ditch, which if you're in a ditch in the U.S., it is like an open sewer is what a benjo ditch basically is in Korea. It's like a sewer ditch is basically what it boils down to. Anyway, we hiked through we hiked through a benjo ditch the last mile, crawled up to the fence line, scoured the fence line until we found where a dog had basically dug underneath the fence, and in the Air Force's awesome wisdom, the maintenance crew just decided to basically stick like a piece of plywood over the hole that the dog had built underneath the fence line. And so we pulled that piece of plywood out, broke it in half to basically create 2 makeshift shovels, and we dug a hole underneath the fence that we ultimately crawled through to use to attack this this Patriot missile battery. And so like that was physical pen testing. That was what we did for physical pen testing in those days, and it was a wicked lot of fun. So to kind of answer your question, Gonzo, the worst experience I actually ever had pen testing, and the reason I don't ever worry about getting arrested or really honestly any type of any type of negative activity when I do for pen testing is because we were doing a different exercise where, we were simulating a protest on a military base. So there was a comms camp that was set up next to an airfield, and they had fence line all around it. And so we had recruited about 75 airmen to kind of come and help us with that. But there were only like a handful, about 12 of us who were Op 4 that were supposed to be in the front just in case the opportunity presented itself. And so imagine 75 people cranking on this chain link fence, right? Protesting the military being in Korea. We're banging, everything else like that. And I'm in the front, like, if you think like a chain link fence with like the little U-shaped bracket that goes over the pole, right? I don't know who didn't secure it, but everybody's shaking this fence. And all of a sudden I see this U-shaped bracket pop up and down, and the fence cracks open just a little bit. I'm 24, something like that at the time, 25, something like that at the time, I don't know. And an instinct in me, that bad guy instinct in me, saw that fence line crack open, and boy, I took off. I pushed that fence line open, and I just took off sprinting. And I want to tell you unequivocally, I have about 15 seconds of memory of sprinting, of hauling ass towards the comm tent before I hear this ATV, woo, and I feel this knee in the back of my shoulder blade. Next thing I know, I am face down on the pavement with a live M16 pointed right at the back of my head, face down on the pavement. It was painful. It was a little bit scary because you're not supposed to have live rounds, and so whoever hit me with live rounds thought I was actually really a threat instead of the simulated threat. And so like I've been face down on the pavement with an M16 with live rounds in the back of my head, pretty dazed and confused at the time. It was pretty gnarly. Had a lot of fun doing that stuff. I definitely, it made it really easy to do physical pen testing on the outside when I got out in 2013. And for seven-ish or so years, I was doing pen testing on the outside, and I never came into, nearly as afraid as I was that day breaking through that fence line. And no, that was definitely not in the job description, Bryant. It was, if you're pen testing, like when we talk about pen testing, there's so many facets to it. You can't be an expert in all of them, right? And there are definitely parts of pen testing, there's definitely parts of pen testing that resonate with certain people. Like web pen testing doesn't resonate with me whatsoever at all. Like I could give a poop less about APIs and cross-site scripting and stuff like that. Like that stuff just does not appeal to me whatsoever. But social engineering, lying to people for a living, tricking people for a living, doing physical pen tests and breaking into stuff, network-based attacks, right? That type of stuff, all day, every day, hands down. We were watching Sneakers. Talk about favorite hacker movies. If anybody in chat, right, hasn't seen Sneakers, or if you have seen Sneakers, drop your favorite line or quote or scene from Sneakers into chat. But I absolutely loved the movie Sneakers, and I shared it with my wife. So Carmen, she's obviously in cyber as well, but she's from Romania, and she's only been in the U.S. for like 13 years. And so she had never seen the movie Sneakers. And so we watched Sneakers the other day, and she was like, is this what got you into pen testing? I was like, yeah, this movie, where they break into the bank and they're like testing the bank security and stuff like that, hands down, that's what sold me on doing pen testing. But I mean, it wasn't a thing back then, but I know, I was like, God, if I could have a career like that, it'd be so much fun. Thank you for this. I appreciate that. My base friend prepares group Discord. Your YouTube channel is their Discord page. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. It means the world to me. I love having folks, follow us, come and hear my stories, listen to my rabble, stuff like that. Uh-oh. Carmen texted me. Oh, never mind. All right. My wife's the best. She made me strawberries for breakfast. Speaking of base, I'm working with Whisper. If Whisper's around, if he can hear me, thank you so very much. His command extended me an invite to go down to Camp Lejeune and speak at Camp Lejeune in December. You're going to be in the Camp Lejeune area. If you're a Marine and can travel to Camp Lejeune, be on the lookout. I'll be in Camp Lejeune, I think the first week of December, speaking in person at Camp Lejeune, which also goes to remind everybody, if you want me to speak at your event, if you are military and you want me to come to your base and speak at your base, there is no fee. I do not charge a speaker fee to come speak to veterans. Please let me know if you want me to come to your base if you are military. Callie, you don't count unless you're going to pay me to fly to South Korea. But I'm more than happy to come speak at your base. I do utterly love speaking, and I love going to travel to other bases to speak. Is it possible to keep up with the industry without knowing how to web pen test? Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. Like there's definitely a larger chunk of web app pen tests, right? Like I can understand the question. I don't begrudge this question. I think it's a totally fair question. I think the answer is yes, unequivocally, right? There's definitely a lower bar to entry. When I say a lower bar to entry, there are more opportunities. There is a lot more material out there. You can do bug bounties based solely on web application pen testing. You can't do that with network pen testing. You can't do bug bounties with social engineering, obviously, and things like that. And so web pen testing, I have acknowledged that is a gap that if I ever got back into the pen testing space, I would need to acknowledge that that's where my gap is. But you absolutely can get by very, very well and do very, very well with yourself being a network, guru, being an Active Directory guru, being a social engineering guru. There are 1,001 ways into a network. Anybody who tells you differently is delusional. Is delulu, as they say. But web app is, don't get me wrong, web app is super important. Like if I were to rank them, like if I were to tell you my advice to you in terms of learning is to learn web app first, hands down. Like all of you should be web app masters. It was just never a skill that came easy to me. And therefore, like it or not, hackers are lazy, myself included. And since it never came easy to me, I just didn't follow it. right? Oh man, Outcast coming in hot, 1,000%. Bug bounties for physical pen tests. Could you imagine what that business model would look like? Holy cow! Right? You got to spend a lot of time. I imagine I'm just visualize this in my head, right? Bug bounties for physical pen test. You have to be okay spending some amount of time in jail before the company I imagine before they authorize your release. The lawyer fees and the get out of jail for free that they're talking about in chat is very, very real. When I would do this, especially the physical pen test, I did one in Louisiana one time. I made the CISO and the chief legal counsel of the company write me a letter with both of their signatures on it, as basically a get out of jail for free card. And I did almost need it. This was another hospital in Louisiana. That's probably narrow enough. You could probably figure out which hospital it is. And they obviously, we had done the hospital, but they wanted us to do, like, if you live in a big city where you've got like a major hospital, I'll use Duke, for example, here in Raleigh, right? Duke has got a major complex in Raleigh and a major complex in Durham, right? But at the same time, they've got these little offices, right? As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, before I went to Austin, when I went to go get my last CT scan, I went to one of these little remote offices to go get my blood work done. And we're talking like a 5-6 story building, right? Something like that. Nothing too big, but it's got like various services like blood work, maybe some physical therapy, right? Doctor's offices, right? Typical type of stuff. They wanted us to test some of those remote offices. One of the harder ones was that the CISO wanted to go with me. And I was like, dude, are they not going to know your face? And he was like, oh, we could totally go to one where they don't know my face. And I was like, are you sure? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. We'll totally go to one where they don't know my face. And I was like, all right, I'm not really sure what doctor's office we're going to go to where they don't know the CISO's face. That's kind of scary in and of itself, but sure, let's go make it happen. Right. And so we go to this office, and sure enough, they didn't know the CISO's face. And so I had to figure up a pretext, for two people to come in there. And so I used my tried and true IT. Pretending to be IT. Like, I made that post on LinkedIn that talked about the Muggle stuff, but honestly, like, people do look at what it is that we do as magic, and so it was real easy, to come in and be IT, because people are like, oh, they're from IT, I don't know what it is they're doing. They're doing some magic. Go let them do whatever it is that they're doing, right? And so I used my IT one, and so we went back to a doctor's office, and I plugged in my laptop, and I started to do stuff on the network, and about 10 minutes in, the chief medical person that was in that office came. They were like, hey, they said you were from IT, but I usually get calls from IT when they're going to come down because of how disruptive it is. And they didn't call me while you were there. And so, like, I tried to dance my way through it. He went away, came back and said, hey, you guys sit right here. I just called security because I don't think you're supposed to be here. Now, granted, it took him, like, this whole thing took about 20 minutes. So, I mean, obviously there's still a lot of damage that I could do in 20 minutes of being there. But when security got there, because we tried to leave, he wasn't having it. When security got there, we had to present the letter that was kind of like, yo, hey, authorized pen test. This is the CISO standing right here next to me. He had to show his credentials and everything else. But those letters do help. Like, if you're working for an org that does physical pen tests, like, that should be on your checklist number one that you're asking for is, yo, can I get a letter that doesn't send me to jail, right, for breaking into this company? But I do love physical pen testing. I'm trying to break into the industry. I'm pretty good at networking stuff and more keen to OS stuff. I think learning web pen tests would take me a while since I need to first learn JS. That's why I asked the question, do you think I should focus more on what I'm good at as a beginner and explore something possible first? I mean, there's a, 100% red flag, Leak Kitty. 100% red flag. You should definitely, like, when things come easy, you should hone that knife. Right? And that's not to say that you shouldn't work on the things that are hard. Listen, and I'll use golf as an example, right? Right? Because I'm learning a lot of stuff with golf, right? Those who don't know, I'm on a PGA journey. I'm trying to become a PGA golfer. There's a lot that's involved in that. A lot of training, a lot of learning. I've never been an avid golfer. I've never been an athlete. Despite my awesome physique, I've never been an athlete. And so I'm having to learn a lot of stuff. There's lots of stuff that comes easy. That stuff that comes easy helps boost your confidence, helps keep you excited, helps defeat imposter syndrome. And I can't stress this one enough. The things that come easy that you can hone in on help you to defeat imposter syndrome. As a matter of fact, Jens, if you're listening, can you drop the link or hit, I think, is it exclamation point imposter? I'm not sure if that's still, is that one? Imposter. Is that it? There we go. Awesome. There's the imposter syndrome video. Go look at my, like, just a reminder, Jens, we should do a post on the imposter syndrome video. It's been a while. There are 4 actionable things in that video that can help you defeat imposter syndrome. One of those is focusing on what you're good at. Right? Imposter syndrome happens to everybody. And so to your question, you should focus in on what you're good at, because that helps you reinforce that you're awesome in your progress to be better. So what do? When I go to warm up, I warm up with clubs that I'm really, really good at, with shot shapes that I'm really, really good at, with my comfort zone, because the last thing that I want to do when I warm up is to be frustrated because something isn't working right. You understand that concept? You understand what that means, right? Now, once I'm warmed up, once I feel confident in what it is, like, okay, cool, I'm here, right? I'm in the groove. I'm ready to be challenged. Then I will move to something challenging, right? And I'll start, listen, this is super important in the learning process. And I'm going to share this with golf because I'm going through this right now. Some of you are going through it with cyber, and I want to explain something to you, right? I'm sharing you my golf stories because the learnings that I'm doing with golf were the same learnings that I went through with cyber in my early days. But now I'm doing it with something different outside of my comfort zone, and I'm living it with you. When you start something new, start with small moves. Start with small, diligent moves. Break it up into chunks that are easy to understand. This is super important, right? There is a lot to learn in cyber. There is a ton to learn in cyber. As if that weren't already evident with everything that is out there to learn. There's so much to learn in cyber. And so if you're going to be successful in those learning endeavors, you have to start by breaking this stuff up into smaller chunks so that you can digest the smaller chunks. But don't overdo it. And this is definitely something that I see a lot of learners do. From my time at SANS, when I was teaching for SANS, when I was building content for INE, when I was chief content officer at INE, when I talk to coachees that I have now, right? They try to bite off more than they can chew. They're like, oh, this is going really, really well. I'm just going to keep learning new stuff. And there is diminishing returns to learning. Right? Let's acknowledge that up front. There are diminishing returns to learning. Meaning you can't just keep pounding away at hard topics and hard topics and hard topics and hard topics and expect that stuff to stick. There's a saying that if you spend 18 minutes a day learning something, you will be better than 99% of the people in your profession or in your trade. 18 minutes a day. That's all you need. That's all you need to be better than the person next to you. Right? So like, once I realized that I didn't need to go spend 7 hours at the range. There were diminishing returns to spending 7 hours at the driving range. You know what transformed my game? Breaking them up into little chunks. I'll go spend an hour on chipping, and then I'll take a break. Then I'll go spend an hour on putting, and then take a break. I'll go for lunch here, since I got the simulator in the house. I'll go in there and I'll hit balls on the simulator, one club, one shot shape, fundamental basics for 20 minutes at a time. Consistency, exactly, Hector. Consistency at that 18 minutes a day is what will transform your craft. Whether it's golf, pen testing, social engineering, web app work, network work, 0-day development, whatever the case it is, 18 minutes a day. That's all you need. And so back to your question, I mean, listen, you're doing really, really good stuff. Like you talk about, you need to learn JS. Who's telling you got to learn JavaScript? Nobody in the industry should be telling you have to learn JavaScript. Otherwise, you're listening to the wrong people. Anybody who tells you that you must do X, I wouldn't listen to. Myself included. If you ever catch me saying, this is the only way, please call me out on it. We have a very open line of communication here at this stream. There are lots of things. You must not do anything. You should only do what you need to do. USMC Nerd Dad, glad to see you, first time chatter. Thank you very much for your service. I wish I had known 13 years ago. I wish I would have known 13 years ago. I could have expanded on skills I learned on a red team cell while in the Marines. Absolutely. Maurelius, consistency of discipline to stick with it. You have to break it into small chunks like Neal said. It's super easy to get overwhelmed and lose focus. 1,000%. I know, listen. I know it feels like let's have a real conversation here for a second, right? I know it feels like if you don't do the Elon Musk thing and you don't work, 40 hours a day, if you don't, lose sleep, right, then you're never going to be awesome. And I can tell you that that's just not reality. Right? It may work for some people and it may work for a short amount of time, but take it from a recovering workaholic, it's not worth it. Right? I damn near put myself in the hospital. Carmen has been in the hospital for overworking herself. Right? It is not healthy and not required. Listen, if you put it in perspective, if you only need 20 minutes a day to be better than 99% of the people out there, that is evidence enough. Honestly, if we're being cynical, if we're being truthful with each other, that's a testament to how lazy the rest of the world is in learning their craft and how awesome you could be by being better than everybody else who's lazy. I believe in all of you. I really do. I wholeheartedly believe in all of you. Be easier on yourself. Be easier on yourself. ADHD Arts Entertainment. Good morning, all. Just hopped in to say hello and thank Neal and service members for the sacrifice. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. As always, we always love thanking our service members, our veterans. I've got John Rao waiting for him to show up in the green room. That's what you catch me looking at over here, is I'm just watching to see when John shows up in the green room. We should be getting close to John showing up in the green room here pretty soon, and we can get started with the second half of this. Huge shout out to all of our service members. I'm splitting my golf tournaments this year. I've got my first golf tournament when's November 30th? I think that's like 3 weeks from now. Somebody look at a calendar, tell me I think I'm 3 weeks away. 1, 2, 3, yeah. November 30th, first tournament back of the 2025 season. So I want to thank everybody who's been keeping up with me, who's been following me on Instagram, following my golf journey, following my off-season work. I'm super excited to roll into the 2025 season. I've changed leagues. I've moved up to the Amateur Players Tour, which is a much larger tour, a much more sophisticated tour. I'm super nervous and super excited, but on November 30th, I'll be playing in my first tournament. I want to remind everybody, listen, my travels are picking up. And so I'll remind everybody on a couple of things. First and foremost, make sure you are following all my social media accounts, right? X, Instagram, there's 2 on Instagram. You can hit ! Socials in chat, right? Follow the link tree that's in the LinkedIn post, because whether it's golf related or cyber related, I always appreciate anybody's interaction, and I always try to bring everything back for lessons that we can all learn together, whether it's golf related or not. And I appreciate all the folks who support me and my stories when I show up at golf tournaments. But that's not the only reason. The other reason is you're going to want to get in touch with me. Let me say that again for those in the back. You're going to want to get in touch with me. Well, Neal, why the hell would I want to get in touch with you? That's a good question. I don't really know either, right? But as my travels pick up, I always make time for people in those regions. Always. It is free mentorship, free coaching if I am in your area. But you got to get ahead of it, and you got to send me DMs early. I will unequivocally spend time with you completely and totally for free if I am in your area. And so make sure that you're paying attention to social media so you know where I'm at, right? So for instance, November 30th, I'm going to be in Myrtle Beach. We play in TPC Myrtle Beach down there. Then I go to Camp Lejeune to speak at Camp Lejeune. But then I go to Atlanta, and I'll probably spend about a week in Atlanta. And then I'll go back to Myrtle Beach for another round of tournaments. And so if I'm in any of those areas, what do you mean by area? How do you define radius of my area? That's a fantastic question. Reasonable drive, right? Reasonable drive. Like I'll meet you halfway within an hour, right? I'll drive an hour away for a golf course. If you want to spend 4 hours with me on a golf course, I'll do that. I'll drive an hour for that. I'd say reasonably 30 minutes to an hour. Something like that. Pretty easy. That's a fantastic question, Rescue Diver. I should. Jens, make a note. We should figure out a way to do a schedule. Make a note, Jens. We will take that back as feedback. You can always go into Discord. Hit ! Discord and chat. I do try to put them into announcements when I am traveling. There's also the hacker meetup that happens inside of Discord as well. Yeah, look, Outcast is on point. It's almost time to let TikTok know that you're almost here. I didn't start TikTok yet because I was waiting for John to show up a little bit. But yeah. Anyway, lots of exciting things. Always around to help. Always around to chat with people. I absolutely love it. For those who are tuning in, welcome to Friday morning tea with a hacker. It's been a couple weeks. I've been on the road for a little bit. I'll also let you know, like I'm working with Maz. Huge shout out to Maz. Maz and Jens have been amazing to me. Close folks helping me work. Jens has been helping me with social media. If you see Jens in chat, give him a huge shout out. A lot of the social media stuff has been Jens. I owe a debt of gratitude to Jens for that. Maz has been helping me stay organized quite a bit with everything that's going on. Maz is also helping me work on trying to create a better remote streaming apparatus where we could, we tried to do this a long time ago when we were moving from Chicago to Raleigh. We're going to try a different approach this time around with Maz's help so that I can do some type of streaming while I'm on the road. So we're working through that right now. So, so we don't have to go as long without streaming. But thanks to everybody who's tuning in this morning. This is a dual stream effort this morning. We got some Tea with a Hacker stuff that's going on. I'm watching the green room over here on the left-hand side, waiting for John Rao to come up. John Rao should be here in a few minutes. Oh, I just saw John show up over there. Let's check John's audio really quick before I introduce him. Let's see if John's audio is working. John, your audio working?
I hope not.
Oh, look at there. We got John audio.
Oh, now I'm centered. Here we go.
You're a little quiet. Let's see if we can fix that. All right, John. Jeremy sang on stream. Can you sing a bar really quick and let chat hear if you're good on audio?
I cannot sing at all, and you don't want to hear any bars from me because I'll say something inappropriate. I've been listening to a lot of Mobb Deep.
A lot of Mobb Deep. Nice. Good. Now that you're here, man, dude, we've had some great questions this morning with the AMA stream this morning. Right in your wheelhouse, as a matter of fact. We were talking about information warfare operations.
Hey.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of it's tied to social engineering. I know it's not what we had on script, but since you're here and it did come up in chat, what's, give me your 30-second take, if you will, on, kind of the relationship between information warfare and social engineering.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that social engineering could be an aspect of it, right? It depends on what the commander's intent is, right, to use a military term. But it's all about controlling the information battle space, so to speak, because at the end of the day, your adversaries have to get their intelligence in some form or another by qualifying data and information. Maybe that's from OSINT, maybe that's from HUMINT, and the humans that they're gathering it from, their assets they develop are not properly informed. So adversarial IW assets could very much social engineer and start to attack people in that way. And then there is carryover into what the Joint Chiefs of Staff now call SEMA, cyber security, electromagnetic activity, since cyber is now part of the space and EW domain. It's an interesting field for sure. There's a lot of different elements to it, right? You have psychological operations, you have civil affairs, cultural outreach teams, and then, just regular humanitarian stuff. But, just because somebody shows up with a smile in the box doesn't mean that they're not there developing assets.
Right. I think it's interesting that cyber is now being lumped with EW, electronic warfare. When I was going through, it was tagged to information operations. And so it's interesting to watch that evolution and that transition over time.
Yeah, for sure. I know it as IO, right?
Yeah.
Information operations. And I think I heard you with that bit this morning as I was dropping one of the kids off. So it's there's a lot of relevance in our space, but it's just hard to explain it decoupled from the military thing. But a lot of things in cybersecurity come from the mil side, as you know. I mean, most of our business terminology comes from the military side, which I don't know. I think President Eisenhower tried to warn us about it in the 50s, but we didn't listen.
No, I think that's super relevant because, as folks are listening, and then I'll introduce what we're going to talk about today. It's been easy. It's been easier for me to transition into cyber post-military than it was pre-military for that reason. After the 10 years I spent in the service, developing op plans, developing op orgs, executing op orgs and things like that, and then getting out and saying oh my God, cybersecurity execution, whether it's offensive or defensive, whether it's CISO work, security leadership work, whatever the case is so much easier when you think about it in the military lens than I would believe the way that people think about it today.
I agree there. There's only a couple things that I think the civ side of the house does a little bit better than the military because of the broadness and emergency management, 100%. And that's where a lot of good IR teams really, I think, get good is when they take emergency management quite seriously. And, I've heard you talk about it on stream, and we've talked about it as well, just kind of like in the greater overall cybersecurity, I guess, hiring, the ever-changing cybersecurity hiring landscape, to use a marketer term, because I know they're listening. I hear them in the void. But it would be good to, have like firefighters and EMS and folks who've done incident command outside of it. But other than that, everything else does make a lot more sense from a military perspective, especially intelligence. Like, I have a love-hate with CTI when some people try to explain it. And the best CTI practitioner I ever met, I worked with her at IHS Market, and guess what? She was still National Guard component with Army doing signals intelligence. And I think she was a mass center as well at one point. And then I know, Jax, right? Jax did EW features with 5th group, I think she was with, and 3rd group. Well, if she was in 5th group, I would have probably ran into her. So I think she was somewhere else. But
and we've got AJ Nash, who's been on the stream before, who did tons of work at SIGINT with NSA too. So I mean, we've got we've got lots of rich CTI folks.
Now there are, which but again, my personal take on it. I don't want to say it on stream.
That's all right. With that being said, as you guys can see, I'm here with John again. John, I'm so grateful that you took time out of your schedule to sit with me today. I missed you on stream, buddy.
Likewise, nice being here, bro.
I know you got a lot of shit going on, and you're crushing it on the backside, but you're here. Let's let everybody take advantage of you being here on stream. I'm gonna quickly remind everybody, this is kind of the second half of our stream this morning. This is our November 8th episode of the Security Data Ops, kind of our bi-monthly stream to talk about all things security operations, data operations, and really the governance of those two in a modern day cybersecurity team. Decided to do it today, mostly because I was on an airplane coming back, John, yesterday from Texas. Yay, Texas. Reminder of everybody, the rules: no toxicity, no racist, sexist, misogynistic, or otherwise toxic behavior in chat. We do have mods in chat who make no qualms out of utilizing that ban button, but mods are not here, however, to stifle chat in any way. Which leads us to our next question. We love our next rule, more of a reminder than anything else. We absolutely love questions. Folks who are here typically familiar with the AMA format, absolutely. We're going to still be taking your questions while John and I talk today. And we'll pull your questions up throughout the stream, as we're talking through kind of the topic that we've got talked through today. We do topical type of stuff whenever we specifically do these SecDataOps ones to keep the focus really, really specific on a specific topic. And I'm excited for the topic that John and I have for you today. But we do encourage questions throughout the stream. We are broadcasting across every channel, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, X. I think I hit all of them there. All the platforms, all the things. We're streaming across all the things. Drop your questions in chat. John and I will do our absolute best to answer them. Our topic today, John, is something that you and I, we've watched, kind of the folks that we've dealt with, the folks that we've talked to in the industry as we're going through this journey with Query. I think, we've got a pretty interesting topic for today. I know it's something we're going to, you and I have talked about as being really, really cool. You come from a pretty good background in consulting. I come from a background in consulting. You've got a lot of experience in cloud engineering, cloud offensive security hacking, program data engineering, things like that. The stuff that you've done for Query has been nothing short of amazing. With that, John and I have typically brought guests on this show to talk about the challenges, the struggles with security data, the struggles with security operations, the challenge of bringing kind of those two things together. This time, John and I wanted to, instead of yapping about it, as John loves to use that term, yapping about stuff, we decided to try a workshop format, and John and I want to teach you something. You can imagine John and I in front of a classroom trying to teach you something. I don't necessarily know how well that would work out.
Uh-oh.
John, when was the last time you taught something?
Well, my kids don't count. I don't know. my pop used to tell me all the time, and he still does, right? Because he still works, that like you don't really understand a topic until like you could teach it at like a
Yes.
very rudimentary level. Now that doesn't go for everything. So we'd be like, well, actually, how can you teach somebody about information warfare? It's like, all right, yeah, got it. There's advanced topics I can't boil down without yapping a lot. But I don't know. The last time formalized was when I was a TAM at AWS. Actually, no, when I was running AWS Security Hub, and I would do customer engagements on how to best use Security Hub when there wasn't a ton of CSPM options out there from the cloud providers. And also, you did that thing I don't like, complimenting me. Don't compliment me now because you're awesome, first off. F the accolades, right? Like job titles, where you've been at, like none of that matters. It just powers, either future ambition or money to buy stuff and provide for the community. But Neal, I mean, everybody knows you because this is your show, but I've learned a lot from you, and the things that I won't talk about here that we've talked about, you've been through a lot too, similar things with me, and I absolutely admire you for that. And you're only, one of the few who keep me honest when I get a little bit crazy. So you're an awesome human, and I think that's a lot more important than what you've done and whatnot, even though what you've done is a lot better because you're closer to a real CISO than I was. Like, I didn't know anything about GRC. They're like, hey, we need to be SOC 2. And I was like, I have 2 SOCs. Yeah.
That is probably the best answer that you could have given. No, I appreciate that, John. And I think that's why you and I make a great team. And I honestly think, go New York Rangers.
And yeah, honestly, you already know. Well, just not last night.
Did they lose last night? Oh boy. No, I appreciate that. And and I think the community knows one of my passions really is about teaching. And so with that, John and I are really going to be conducting what I think, John, is going to be the first of many of these data workshop series, right? I do view this as a multi-part series. We will have, I talked with the team, this is actually stuff that we're going to be able to give you product, right? And I don't mean product like query product, like we're working on worksheets that you're going to be able to go and download so that you can do your own self-assessment on this, right? John and I are going to talk through it a little bit, but we wanted to give back to the community. And one of the biggest ways that we thought we could give back to the community was to produce almost like a one-pager that we're going to be able to give you for free for you to use at your organization to self-assess yourself and self-action on the things that John and I are going to talk about here today. So with that, John, you excited? You ready for this?
I'm always ready, man.
It's always hard to tell. Like John's going to be like, I want everybody to understand, like there's 2 sides to John. When I asked John if he's excited, there's either the side that we saw or there's the let's go side. Like it's all right. So we'll see which side we get later on, but it's always weird which side we get with John. That's all right. All right, John, first and foremost, as with anything, we need to understand why we need to do some type of data security assessment, right? At its core, if we think about an organization, most organizations have outgrown a traditional SIM setup. They've hit that aha moment, right? That security data is everywhere. They can't keep track of it. They don't know how to use it. For me, those would be the 2 key factors of knowing that you needed to do this type of assessment. What are some key points that you think, because you've got a ton of experience in data engineering, you've got a ton of experience in this data architecture business, what are some key points that you think would lead someone to that aha moment that they need to do this type of assessment?
Yeah, I mean, to keep it a stack, I think 80% of it is a financial lever, especially for teams in a bigger organization where CIO, CTO organization, or even the CFO, if they're a technologist CFO, own the SIM spend. Because traditionally, right, like a big company is going to have kind of like that shared services, enterprise technology center core that runs all of these other shared services, The security might touch EDR, but they don't pay for EDR, right? So 80% of the time, I think it's a fiduciary decision. Now, is it the right one? Who knows? But a lot of times it's like, hey, this thing's getting too expensive. I read this white paper about this here security data lake, boy. So I think you need to move to that one. I don't know why I do the red tech voice every time I talk about a CIO. But I think on the other side of it, 20% are folks who exhaust their capabilities in a platform and they realize like, hey, we're in pain, right? Where it's, I can't run the amount of detections I want fast enough. I can't get the right data out of this, SIM or lake platform that I might be in, right? Because a lot of people talk about this as if you're moving off a SIM and you're not. But there's a ton of different reasons, sometimes it could be all of them. Sometimes it could be just one that you would harness security data, right? It could be for supporting machine learning, right? Like basic stuff, linear regression, random forest. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't need agentic AI to do it, but maybe you're fine tuning AI. Maybe you're building a RAG, a retrieval augmented generation part of an LLM for some security use case. Perhaps you're building an enterprise knowledge graph, a security property graph, whatever it is. Eventually, those teams that are strong technology wise will realize, hey, what we have right now is not working, either process or tech, but it's usually both, not necessarily the people. And then they'll be like, okay, it's time to evolve. And then from there, it's like, well, work backwards from that job. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
I think you hit the really key point that I want to double down on, right? Is at some point in time, every security team hits an inflection point that is initially driven by a fiduciary hit, but then they get hit with that second wave pretty quickly, which is I can't do my job good enough because everything is so disparate, right? You can't fiscally centralize everything. And so everything is everywhere and your teams are locked in to a process that is inefficient. And your teams are miserable, your SOC analysts are miserable, your threat hunters are miserable, your security engineers are miserable, your security architects are miserable. And I think that's where, at least when I've built SOC teams in the past, that's the frustration, right? Is that they know that there is more that they could do, but they are stuck on an island that is surrounded by data that they have no idea how to handle.
Right. And I think it's an important point as well that you touched on that I'll hammer on is, the centralization versus decentralization. That's become a really hot topic right now. And of course, depending on the type of security data company, right? Like, are they in the moving data business? Are they in the centralization business? Are they in the vending business, right? That all have their own takes on it. And you could build a modernized, security data ops stack with a SIM at the center of it, to be completely honest. It just really depends on how you use it. But yeah, I mean, unless you're real tiny, right, like startup like our size, I think like we could have probably just dumped everything in a Splunk, right? That would work. That would be cheaper, honestly, than dumping into Databricks. And depending on the use case of the data, may be cheaper than on Snowflake. It just really depends, right? But some people take the opposite approach where it's like everything's decentralized. And then you have, the federation model to kind of help with that decentralization. But there's some folks who just want this like data diode vending machine where they're just going to stage all their data. And it's like, look, I think you can make that work. But, if we find that in an assessment, it's like, okay, who's going to maintain all that? And what's going to happen when the person downstream consuming that data vending machine, that diode, is like, oh, I don't like the chart in this color. And also I want this graph here. And this needs to be a box plot. And this needs to be a stacked bar chart. And this needs to have a line diagram. And then it's completely opposite. Then who's going to be maintaining and versioning all that stuff? Yeah. Bad idea.
So as you can hear, like if these sound like challenges that your org is dealing with, or if you sound like, if you're like, this isn't just a strategic conversation. If you're a SOC analyst, if you're a security architect, if you're a security engineer listening to this and you're like, yeah, I see this happening around me. These should be moments where you look up and you're going like, maybe this type of assessment, right? Maybe I should do this type of self-assessment on our organization. That's what you should be thinking right now. And so, John, you and I are both consultants. You mentioned you were, a TAM for AWS. I worked at PwC for a while. And so we approached this problem, right, of trying to build this content out very much like consultants. And the first thing that we do in any engagement, John, discovery.
Oh yeah, baby.
So can you talk through like what is discovery in general?
To quote Mob Deep, it's give up the goods and get sprayed. But we're not discovering.
Mob Deep's a little bit of a millennial term for those who are not familiar.
Yeah, I mean, I still think their heyday was like in the late 90s. I know they came out with albums in the early 2000s before they got locked up, but I don't know. I think they only have like 2 or 3 good albums. Anyway, I mean, discovery is just what it sounds like, right? Like we're going to discover stuff. Hopefully, when we get brought into an assessment, we've done a few of these now with prospects as well as active customers. I don't think that the powers that be are going to just let us start up the Neal and John consultancy shop. But the most important thing about discovery, like I said, it's in the name. It's what are you doing, right? To quote my old boss, CISO at IHS Market, Eric, was it's the what, the so what, the what next.
Yeah.
But working backwards from it, it's like, okay, like what is your what next? Like what goal are you reaching towards? Like what tech stack, what capability are you trying to unlock? What pain points do you have? And then let's talk about what you're doing to support it, right? Because a lot of times we come in and they're like, hey, we're in the middle of a SIM modernization. We're going from a SIM to a new SIM. We're going from a SIM to a lake to a lake house back to a SIM. We're decentralizing, we're federating, whatever it is, it's figuring out kind of the pain point or, maybe the impetus that started it, what they're trying to accomplish with it. Maybe it's just reducing costs and hey, that's fine. Maybe it's onboarding extra data. It could be banal, right? It doesn't have to be, oh, bro, we're going to, I just spilled water all over my keyboard.
It's not the first time that's happened. It's not the first time that's happened on stream at all, I promise you.
All the beers have been cleaned out. But, it could be something that's completely, what somebody might consider boring. But, hey, I think it's not boring to increase the amount of data you have because that leads to making good information. And you need good information for intelligence.
Brought it back around.
But it's figuring out all that. And then as well as like the boring stuff, right? The like what tech, what data feeds, what are you using right now? I think that's where some consultancies may over-index, especially ones that are like high in billable hours.
Yeah.
And they take their time enumerating every little freaking thing. I think that is important, but it's only important in the context of like, where are you going? Where are you at right now? And why do you want to go there?
Yeah. I think I like what John said. And what John mentioned that we've done a couple of these for folks in the past, like we're giving you the tools so that you can do this completely, on your own right now. I think that was something that John and I were very adamant about, is that this is completely doable by anybody who listens to this. It doesn't require a special skill. Like discovery, as John said, is really just asking questions. Like where is your data at? Where is it disparate at? Which ones are being used for security operations, incident response, threat hunting? Which ones are being used for business context, right? And you hit on something, right, John? You'd said, what, so what? You use what next. I think I use what now, but I think you can use them interchangeably because you talked about, backing into the problem. And I very much view this, and I think that this is I think you and I both agree that this is one of the core key concepts when you do any form of discovery, when you're doing an assessment, is you really have to find that alignment of those strategic goals and objectives at all levels of the team, right? You want it from the analyst to the CISO, you want that alignment, you want that what next.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's different personas in there that I'm glad that you touched on as well, because earlier on when we were talking about this, you mentioned that like, hey, even if you're just a quote unquote regular SecOps analyst, I know it's easy to get stuck in that trap. It's like, oh, I'm just like an L4 or an L5. Like, what does it matter? It's like you matter probably the most of everybody for these sorts of problems, because it's when you're in pain that hopefully, like, that's what I hope to find out is that, hey, our team is struggling under, to use like the marketing catch terms, the high volume, ever evolving data. It's so voluminous.
Trademark marketing.
Yeah. But, the folks that are, boots on the ground in the friggin' trenches, right, in the pillbox are going to have a completely different outlook about why a project's happening. Maybe they're the impetus, or maybe we talk to them and they're like, oh, I can't believe that freaking, they're making us move to this data lake and you have to use this new tool. I just want to write SPL. I'm afraid, right? And we've mentioned that in a couple streams about like, hey, just don't make these SecDataOps decisions in the blind, right? If it's like, okay, we're going to move everybody to SQL, it's like, cool. What happened to the people with 5 years of
Yes.
writing detection content in
Yes.
SPL? What are you going to do to them? Are you going to retrain them? Oh no, we'll just hire new consultants. Don't like people like that. I get it. Businesses have to make money, right? But I'll just leave it there. Then you have middle management, right? You have kind of like the more specialized folks. Maybe they're researchers, maybe they're threat hunters, maybe they're detection engineers, and then of course you have kind of higher headquarters units, right? The CISO,
Yeah.
the global head of or whatever the SOC director is called. Maybe they run more than just SOC. Maybe they own OffSec. Maybe they own Intel. But it's also kind of getting at them. And I think when we are doing the discovery, it's really just kind of figuring out the facts and feelings more than anything else. Because again, the data is important. Like you need to have that stuff cataloged for the artifacts that we produce later, especially if you're going to actually add rigor to this, right? With version controlled data contracts, well documented, kind of tech requirements about, hey, here's how this is normalized, standardized typing system. We use OCSF, we use ECS, whatever it is. That's like 20% of the engagement. 80% of it's kind of that like more human connectivity that I think is a lot more important, because that gives you the context. Because I could sit here and be like, oh yeah, just use a lake, and it's like, okay, now what?
but I mean, we say that, we joke about that, but I think that's what we've seen, is that there have been some people who have said, like, let's just use a lake, and there's analysts who are like, well, what does that mean for me? Do I still stay in Splunk? Do I not stay in Splunk? Do I have to learn Athena? I think we talked to one person who suddenly had to shift from understanding SPL in Splunk to doing KQL in Microsoft and in Graph, and that type of abruption of service impacts your ability to protect an organization.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's dangerous. Like you could lose sight real quick when you're in the middle of a migration. And to do it right, you usually have to do like an AB, blue, green, whatever you want to call it, right? Of you got to keep the old stuff up to date while you move on to the new stuff. And, if it's financial pressure, fiduciary pressure, especially for like big shops, right, that are spending 8 figures, maybe even like several 8 figures, right? Like high orders of magnitude of like data and costs in a SIM or a lake or a lake house. That's where it gets really nasty too, where they're like, oh, we want to see the immediate cost savings. We want to zero out OpEx for this quarter. I need to give it back. I need to have the IT financial management team look at our cost tower and be like, oh, look at this. They just saved the business X amount of money. I think that's when it's like super dangerous. And that's some stuff that we stay on top of too, right? Where it's like, this is like a whole, to use the term holistic, but it is. I mean, it's not just SecDataOps. It's, it's technology risk management. It's IT financial management. It's, emergency management, right? There's a bunch of stuff that goes into this.
So as folks are listening, as they're walking away from this, I'd say let's sum it up really quick, right? I'd say when you're doing the discovery, you want to ask tons of questions. You want to, like, regardless of whatever level you're at, whether you're an analyst up to a CISO, you want to ask tons of questions. But I think really what you're trying to do from a discovery perspective is what is it the data that you need? Right? Like, where is it at? What is it being used for? What problem are you trying to solve? And I think that those four things are really just kind of like the crux of that discovery. And if you start asking those questions and you pull on those threads, you should be able to start to draw that picture from a discovery perspective of what it is that you need to see. Any other steps you think you'd add to that in a succinct fashion, John?
No, I mean, just a whole lot of talking, right? A whole lot of yapping.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the second step. So that's first step, discovery. Let's talk about the second step of the process, and probably this is what I think is some of the most fun part of the process and of doing these types of assessments when I do them. Like the discovery side is interesting, but like I think the yapping, John hit the nail on the head, right? You end up talking a lot about feelings and stuff like that, which I do think is important. But this part for me is the fun part, and this is really like the interviews and the talking to folks about their processes, their procedures, and their pain points about their lives on a day-to-day basis. And this is where I see folks, John, I don't know what your take is, where they really start to open up, in those interviews.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's almost therapeutic for some people when they come in, like they're a completely, outside force, right? And it's like, hey, like, we're just here to help you. Like, we're not here to like make recommendations or whatnot. Well, I mean, we do make recommendations depending on the context of the engagement, but it's like, tell us how it works, to use a product term, how the sausage is made,
Yeah.
right? Like, okay, cool, you're using this big cool sim and you have all this detection content. You guys are running ML models and you're, running regression, and you're using half-racine distance models to do impossible travel. And, you're beating out like your commodity tools, like your Casbys and whatnot. Then it's like, okay, well, how do you get to that step from A to B? How do you go from raw data to, intelligence, to something actionable, to a prevention, to a detection, to a recovery?
Yeah.
And you're right, it is a lot more fun, but the discovery is important because a lot of times we could use what we find from other teams, and you find very quickly where there's knowledge silos, right? And you could kind of like bring it forward, but you do have to be diplomatic. And at PwC, I know you've done a lot more of these than I do. How do you remain, like, what's a tip out there for like internal audit folks or people doing these? How do you remain like, I don't know what the right term is, but not incriminating somebody else on the team? Because you could quickly uncover like, oh, there's like actual shadow IT, shadow data.
Yeah,
there's a whole other SIM going on.
And I'll shamelessly admit this, right? As I did learn more about like politics while I was at PwC than I did anywhere else. Because you're right, like during those interviews, it's amazing once you break down that barrier in those interviews, and people start to talk to you about what their real pain points are in their day-to-day, you really start to uncover some of the things that you don't get to see normally in the day-to-day operations. Like, oh, well, I've got this playbook for phishing, but in reality, this tool doesn't work, and so I have to use this manual method to go about doing it. But that tool, to John's point, could be owned by a completely different team, and you've got to figure out, like, oh gosh, this team doesn't know that their tool doesn't work, or maybe they do know that tool doesn't work, and for some political reason internally, they're choosing not to fix the process or something like that. And so in reality, what's happening is that's, causing this team to be inefficient in doing a phishing investigation. And so that dynamic, John's 100% spot on. Like, you almost have to not just, be a great interviewer and a great detective during these interview processes, but then you almost have to be a little bit of that, like therapist, lawyer, political, type of middle person, that broker that says like, okay, how do I convince these two teams that it is their problem that they need to get together and solve as I go through and do these interviews or write this up or write this assessment? No, it's a great question. And it is one of the challenges that I think makes this process fun, because that, to me, and I think this is where John and I have seen our superpowers combine. John, was it, Wonder Twin powers unite, right? Type of thing, right? For those who know that reference. But, I've got a ton of security operations and incident response experience. Data's got a metric F ton of data engineering and programming experience and architecture experience. And when you combine those two together to listen to some of the problems and the challenges that we've encountered from folks, like, you really start to see where their deficiencies are coming in a security team.
Yeah, no, I think it's fun. I mean, even in internal discussions we have here, right, when we're doing like backlog grooming, and I hate that term, like backlog moving stuff around, the things that you key on from your experience and things that I key on, there's almost always like a shared kind of like, either gripe or love for something, but we come at it from two different angles, which is important. And that's why a really good consultancy out there, if you're thinking about starting a consultancy business, is getting in, not just like, people pay lip service to like the diverse word, right? Not that, like an actual diverse team that has like completely different skill sets with just enough overlap. And maybe the overlap just needs to be interpersonal, which I think is important. Because if you just have kind of the same monolithic NPC, auditor number 1731, hello, sir, please tell me, and then read off a freaking rubric.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get anything done. And I think that's why a lot of folks have like a bad taste for consultants, because, we've seen the heyday of consultancy come and go. Then we saw it again, kind of like with these suck tuna box, Golden Corral GRC vendors, right? Where it's like all of a sudden everybody's a consultant again. Now it's kind of like died off. And I think there's a ton of money to be had really for like a really solid small shop to come in and do these sort of things. But Neal's experience here for me is super important, and also Neal's a lot more tactful than I am. I mean, I didn't go to college, man. I grew up in the Bronx. I got a lot of tact.
So with that being said, then let's be super tactful, super tactical, and let's dive in a little bit to, from a data engineering perspective, when you're doing these interviews, who are you talking to and what are you asking them?
Yeah, I mean, we always are going to start with the security folks, right? Unless we're talking with an organization that's actually very well integrated with a DNA team, not a
What's
data
DNA?
and analytics team.
Okay, there you go.
Data and analytics, not like biopsy.
Not like 23andMe.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Rip.
Do a stream. Yeah, rip. And also, like, why would you ever do that? It's like, oh, you just trust this entity that doesn't have to abide by any laws to have my DNA, and like, you're limiting your future.
John.
Oh yeah, I better not. Never mind. I wanted to say something dumb.
Data engineering, John. Data engineering.
Yes, data engineering. Yeah. Well, first off, I'm asking, have they thought about submitting their DNA to 23andMe? But no, typically we're not talking to a data engineering team unless, again, a data and analytics team is either embedded with the team, or they're directly like kind of helping, like they're an attaché or an enabler as part of the security team. But the folks that I'm more interested to talk to, like right off the rip, are if they have a detection engineering function, or if they have like a proper security engineering function. Because I think you have security engineers who are engineers, and you have security engineers who are security watchers. Unfortunately, like they get parked behind, some sort of tool, and it's no fault of their own. It's really their leadership's fault that they're not actually engineering. But I want to talk to the real engineers, DetEng, SecEng. Maybe there's like folks dedicated on the SecOps team. Maybe there's folks from a shared services IT team to be like, hey, again, how's this sausage made? Like, how do you get in this data? What are you using? And then, just your basic table stakes metrics. It's like, how much does it cost you to store it? How much does it cost you to query it? What's the EPS, right? Events per second, or maybe EPM, events per minute, or even EPH. And then hopefully they also have like what, the seasonality trends are. Like, do they ingest the same freaking 50 gigabytes per data source every single day of the week because they have 24/7? Or is it more kind of sporadic? And if it's sporadic, is that a problem? What are they actually using to automate all this stuff? Are they using a commercial off-the-shelf tool? Is it homebrew? Are they using a proper data tool, right? Like a Fivetran and Airflow, kind of older gen stuff, or something newer? Are they using one of these like security data fabric mesh diode washing machine freaking tools to hose stuff around? And I'm not trying to make fun of those folks. Tenzier, Monad, Cribble, even though Cribble's more than just security, those are great options too if it matches your data source. But there's thousands of sources, and these teams could be pulling in Sysmon and app stuff, right? And it's trying to figure it out, and then also fact checking the list we get. Because usually during the discovery phase, they might have something pre-prepared, right? Because we ask them, it's like, hey, be ready to like proffer this information. And then maybe the CISO is knocking on the door of the SecOps manager, and they're pulling a report from the SIM. But then when we find stuff out, it's like, oh, we also have this data and this data and this data. We had these playbooks made, but we actually don't use these playbooks because they're broken. We don't have anybody with the time or expertise to fix them. So we use this tool. This guy's paying for Shodan monitor, his own credit card. This girl has a pro version of Virus Total, right? It's all that stuff, just trying to like figure it out. That's what I care about.
Let me because I know that you are freaking smart on data lakes, and I'm always astounded by your data lake knowledge. When you're asking the data questions, how do Sec Lakes, the S3 buckets, the Databricks, the Snowflakes, what questions are you asking that may be different or very specific to kind of like that Sec Lake or that data lake type of a usage?
I'm still trying to like figure out like those, when I ask those ops kind of metrics questions, it's really to figure out if they have good governance and ops. Ops is the most important part, and good ops has good governance, right? But for that, then it's kind of more like boring stuff, right? Like just to kind of gauge their overall expertise, right? It's like, how many tables, how many databases, like what are you using? Are you using, a traditional data lake that's kind of Hive based? Do you have old school HMS, Hive metadata system? or Hive Metastore rather? Are you an old Hadoop shop? Do they have MapReduce workloads? Are they using kind of more commodity, right? Like they're running data in a Google Cloud storage, and then they're copying that into BigQuery, right? BigQuery is a warehouse, even though I guess technically it's a lakehouse because you can directly connect into the lake using BigQuery Omni Lake. Or is it a traditional lake? Even though it's funny because Hive didn't call a data lake, they called it a data warehouse. Having the Hive metadata catalog, which has the pointer to like the direct file path and stored the schemas in it to allow you to use object storage or use file storage as a database storage layer. They would always call it a warehouse, which kind of made sense in that context. Now we know warehouses like columnar analytical databases or OLAP, online analytics processing. And it's funny that it still has the online portion of it, right? Because not everything was internet connected. But just trying to figure out like what that kit is, right? Like what exactly are you using? Is it a lake house, a warehouse? Is it multiple things? Are you federating between them? How many tables, how many databases? Are you making use of views, materialized views? How are you scheduling the queries? How are you loading it, right? Are you micro batching? Are you live streaming, which is expensive? Are you doing kind of more of that MFT, mass file transfer style of like, oh, we have a job that runs at freaking midnight UTC, which is like, I guess 8 a.m. Eastern or 8 at night Eastern. I always forget what midnight UTC is.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's when all my pipes run.
Yeah.
Which is why I said it. But just trying to like figure out the mechanics there. And you know, with the earlier questions, maybe they already covered it on there. Yeah. We already know, right? Like it's not going to be a surprise. Like we'll find out during discovery kind of what they're using, but then it's like, how are you using it and why and what's it supporting is really the thing. And then there's also kind of like follow-on operations. Like if it is in the lake, are you using one of the new open table formats or not? Do you have multiple query engines? Are you using a caching layer, right? Things like that.
So if a lot of you are confused right now by a lot of the terms that John thrown around, don't worry. So was I when I first started working with John on this. I've gotten a little bit used to it now. We do have, if you go back to the very, very first SecDataOps episode, John does a really good job of going into depth about what these different, data lake terminologies are that exist out there. But this is why I think that like when we decided to do this, I think this is what unlocks like a lot of different perspectives for a lot of security teams, especially security teams that are going on this data journey, is that when you realize that it's not just about your EDR, it's not just about your SIEM, it's not just about Proofpoint or your email gateway or stuff like that. When you start to expand out into these data regions and you start to leverage things like S3 and Security Lake and Snowflake and stuff like that, there's a lot of other considerations that I've seen as I do these that I don't think security teams took into consideration when they were going down this road. And I think this is where I look at it. A lot of the questions I ask is like, really around their security operations, their incident response processes, because what I have found is if you listen to, John talk about like where all this data is, most operational on the ground folks aren't using that data. They're stuck in what is easy for them to access via their SIEM, what is easy for them to access via their EDR, what tools are they familiar with going into and getting the answers that they need to, what have they automated via playbooks and their source stuff. And even though they may have security data that is going in there that John typically uncovers as he talks to these, on the ground, these incident responders aren't using that data because it's too hard to get to. They don't understand the syntax with which to get to that data. It's voluminous, and so it just adds additional noise to their security investigations. And so while it's good that folks are realizing that they need to venture into this, what John and I often see when we ask these questions together, both from a data engineering and security operations, perspective, they've got all this, but they have no clue. They have no clue how to operationalize it, and it's complete and total chaos.
Yeah, I think a lot of times what you find is if they do start moving it, and I think data lake ends up being a trap for people, right? Because think of how many security tools there are out there. Email, DLP, your endpoints, your data security tools, whether they be like old school DLP or DSPM, just think of any security tool or any IT tool or even HRIS tool that you have. Now, how many of them allow you just to dump the JSON, right? So people are like, oh, we could freaking put this in a bucket and then crawl it with a crawler. And then if they don't have any good governance or any like real idea what they're doing, they end up putting all the files in the same bucket. Then they crawl it, and the group crawler is kind of like, okay, whatever you say, boss. I guess I'll do that.
This doesn't make sense, but you're the boss.
Yeah. Now you have 700 columns, and freaking 690 of them are all as null. But whatever, whatever you say, man.
So that resonates with me because you and I just went through that.
Yes, I showed you. I was like, hey, here's what poor data governance looks like. If there's going to be 7,000 nulls, it's like, I get it. Sometimes people are like, oh, well, it can be in there, so we can't null out the field completely. It's like, well, if it's not in there, only 1% of the time, make a new table, make a new view. There's different ways. And that's why I personally do like Lakehouse, Warehouse, sort of, once you understand how they work and how to best utilize them. But then you get into like edge cases, right? Like, okay, what about asset management? Do we dump the asset management into a lake? But, what if I'm querying by 24 hours? And then all of a sudden, you don't get that asset management anymore because now you're indexing off of when the asset was first created. But how's an analyst going to know when the asset's first created? Right. They're trying to figure it out. Then you would say, oh, well, you should query by something else. But, it really depends. Like there's systems out there that kind of like try to help you by time boxing by default. And not a lot of that's apparent when we run into some folks who are like, oh, actually, we have a SIM in a lake. And then we see notebooks and they're running like just these crazy, either like monster 1,000-liner SQL queries with like 10 nested user-defined functions and subqueries and custom table expressions.
I think, hold on really quick, before we move off the data thing, because I think what you're describing there, I think is important to bring up in the data engineering conversation, right? Which is folks who have adopted security lakes, who have tried to operational security lakes, may not necessarily be the most efficient in how they're doing their data engineering. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think the industry is trying its very hardest to ruin security data lakes, honestly. Like, I'm serious. Like, I keep seeing too much of this. Like, I made a meme about it, the goose meme, where it's build your security data lake. It's like, okay, well, I can't touch the storage. I can't touch the catalog. I can't touch the table format. I can't touch the file format. I can't touch compaction. I can't touch the encryption. I can't touch the freaking storage layer it's in.
Yeah.
Honk, and then you chase after them, and then they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just a salesperson." But it is bad, like because it's being just like so many other things. You remember UTM? You remember when SIM first came out and people misused SIM all the time? When Splunky S first came out, and then people misuse and misrepresent Splunky S.
Yeah.
Then you had hundreds of like Splunky S killers that all were garbage. Yeah. Then you had the UEBA days, the Unified CASB days, like all that stuff. I feel like this industry takes stuff that's like really good data things, like concepts, and they just absolutely destroy it. Graphs, ML, AI. Lakes and warehouses are next, and you could get set up for failure. And we joke about this all the time, where it's like, yeah, your SIM bill is pretty expensive right now. Maybe you're paying 30 mil to ingest, petabytes a year and keep it hot, right? You could do that in Splunk. I mean, that's what it's meant for. Like, it's a very high performing index based, not Lucene, really. Apache Lucene is a lot of Elasticsearch is based on. I think Splunk actually has like a patented different index. But you could quickly spend 30 mil on Databricks, on Snowflake, on ClickHouse, on BigQuery, on Redshift. Not trying to single any of those technologies out. All those techs are great, and they could be very cheap. But when you don't know what you're doing and you're relying on somebody just dumping your data into like a format that could be easily queried and give you a couple canned queries that run it every 5 minutes, goodbye to that budget. Like your CISO is going to be out of there in 12 months.
So hopefully, Chad, you take away from this, the data engineering side, like I think is the side that I think we really wanted to bring the emphasis on, because as you're looking at a SecDataOps or a security data strategy, this is the part that I don't think, this is why we do this stream, this is why we talk about this, is because I think this is the part, honestly, that security teams aren't talking about. And so if you're thinking about doing this assessment yourself, if you're thinking about looking at your organization, this is the part where you really need to do your due diligence and you need to dive deep, and you may need to leverage some of your security, your data engineering friends, in the organization to help you with this, because this is the part where I think a lot of the hidden nuances about this this type of self-assessment that you're doing, this is where a lot of that could be really, really done. And so, John, I'm gonna move us on to kind of like the last phase, what I would call the last phase of this, or the last part of this first phase of discovery that we're talking about. And no assessment would be complete, right, without what some people think is the least fun thing to do, and that's the paperwork. And so for this third step,
yes.
we want to review the documentation that's in place, right? We want to look at your process and workflows. We want to look at your team structures. We want to look at your security architecture diagrams, data flows, data volumes. Like if you've got paperwork on this, you want to take a look at it. John, what are you looking for in these documents?
I'm hoping that the documentation exists. That's the most important thing.
That right there is the single biggest challenge.
Like the biggest challenge is, does it exist? Is it up to date? And does it make sense? When I was running the cyber risk graph project at IHS Market, one thing I stressed to the team, I was like, everything we do, we got to document it. Over comment the code. I don't care if software engineers think it's dumb. We're not software engineers. We're security data engineers. We're security data scientists. Comment the hell out of the code, because we're not all experts. Write everything down, diagram everything. Like, everybody was Visio experts by the end of it, right? Like, we're making all these diagrams. So hopefully something exists, right? Where they have some project website, some internal page. Maybe it's a SPO page. Maybe it's a Confluence page. Maybe it's a Slack canvas. Who knows what it is? Or maybe it's just a big ass.
Just something.
Something, right? Where it's like, what's the mission set? What's the criteria? Have a lot of this stuff documented. How does it work? But a lot of times it doesn't exist, or if it does exist, it's inaccurate, it's out of date, hasn't been updated. And that stuff is hard. Like, enterprise knowledge management is a stupid hard problem to solve. And nobody's done it right. I think the closest that we've seen is like maybe Alfresco, and I think one other company. Amazon tried to get into it with like Amazon Kendra using NLP to like figure this stuff out. But that means that you have to have existing documentation for the freaking NLP model to, to actually look at. But does it exist? And if it doesn't, we end up doing a lot of it, right? Like, this is kind of our chance to fact check ourselves, go back and re-interview people as needed, especially after phase 2, where it's like, here's how the sausage is made. And then it's like, well, you guys are using 7 different ETL tools. Why didn't that pop up in the tech that we use? Why is this stuff not documented? This is a SaaS tool. Like, does your freaking TPRM2 team know that you're using this?
Yeah.
So this is where, now we're getting the evidence together, and where that the politics, especially your political kind of, palace intrigue skills come in handy a lot, because we end up having to do a lot of this. And some of it's boring, right? Just spreadsheets. It's like, hey, here's all the metrics we figured out. Here's all the data volume. Here's where your cost is coming from. Maybe our assessment's complete. Like, maybe it's like, hey, can you document it for us? Because you guys are the experts. You know what questions to ask. We can't be bothered. Maybe you could help us get started, right? Because a security, data architecture assessment need not be, like, oh, we're going to build a freaking AI warehouse, right? Like, it could just be, hey, can we like reset, reassess, and start from a clean slate, re-plateau, get to Concord in opposition, and then move on forward. And that's really what I'm looking forward to. And I don't know, I find it fun, just getting everything down on paper, seeing like all the stuff connected, insert the old Sunny meme here. With the tack chart.
The documentation piece is interesting, because I think you're right. Like, I think the number one thing is, does it even exist? Right. And I think I would disagree with you slightly that I'm okay. Like, if I had to choose, I'd rather it exist and be inaccurate than not exist at all, because at least at some point in time, if it existed, at least somebody started to document something, right? Which means there's some, maybe it just hasn't been updated with the change of technology. Maybe it just hasn't been, modified whenever they did a re-architecture. All that I think I could deal with. I think I cringe slightly when documentation goes, and that I would share that with everybody. Like, if you go and you start to do this assessment and you start to ask these questions and you start to ask for documentation and it doesn't exist, like, red flags and red bells, like the everything is fine, dude. Like, that should be you. Be like, oh no, not good.
Yeah, no, I think That's a good point, though, like being a good customer, because a lot of us, not only have we been consultants, I think we've both probably had consultants come in, or at
Mm-hmm.
least some form of auditors.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime, like especially doing the SOC 2 audit, they would, when they would do our type 2, they would ask for a policy or something. And a lot of this is collected beforehand, but like when you actually meet the auditors, and let me put it this way, if you have a SOC 2 engagement, you never meet an auditor, you don't have a valid report. There's no valid report being issued, right? But when they ask me stuff, it's like, oh crap, like I better start getting to work
Yeah.
on documenting this. I better start getting to
Yeah.
work on getting this data. So not having it, like, don't be embarrassed, right? Like we're
Yeah.
not saying like, oh, bad puppy, get in the box. But at the same time, like you want to help us help you if there is a rift in the information space, right? Like you should fill it, like start to document this stuff
Yes.
as you're going on through the engagement. And I think those are the best ones to be on, where the customer is like super eager, they know what they want out of it. And then like, as you come up, like it could be like a continuous improvement sort of thing, not just
Yeah.
waiting for the final readout.
I
Not
think
to get too ahead of ourselves.
I think the reason that we harp on documentation, and John, keep me honest on this one, right, is because John hit the nail on the head a little bit, right, when he talked about tribal knowledge in the teams, right? There are folks who've probably been in an organization for 10, 15, 20 years, who knows, who were there when the organization started. They know where all the skeletons are buried, but they never documented where those skeletons were buried. And sometimes those skeletons have really, really good information that can help you, when you're doing this assessment, understand how to make everything come together and how to make everything work. And so not having that, not being able to pull that knowledge out of somebody's head and put it onto paper and make that documentation true, is a recipe for not being able to fix anything that's wrong. And to John's point, it's not about shaming the people that they didn't document anything. It's about preserving knowledge.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. I think a good leadership team, right? Good projects. When you do this stuff, obviously it's for the benefit of your organization. I guess it could be like corny security people like, oh, we're saving lives here. It's like, depends on the freaking, industry that you're working in. And even then, let's say it's a tertiary benefit, right? It's many orders removed. But, you want to be able to raise this team that you have and set them up for success somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like 2-3 years after this crazy SecDataOps program, like I want people leaving my team and founding their own company to be like, wow, what we did really was valuable, but it sucked. Here's how we could do it better. I want them to take CISO positions. I want them to take SecDataOps, heads positions, right? We're going to make it a real thing. Because I think pretty much everybody knows, right, that SecDataOps, like, came up as a shit post. Like, as CISO at Lightspan.
We also talked about that during the first stream as well. You can go back and see the history of that at the first stream.
We did. But then they had me write, like, okay, let's say it wasn't a shit post. Right?
Yeah.
That sort of
what
thing.
If?
It's like,
what
how
if?
would you want the team? But yeah, I mean, preserving that tribal knowledge, as we call it, it's, look, you can't use shamanism to run a security data ops program, right? Like, no storm calling, no having one person that knows everything. Those people are super important. I think that's what led to a lot of success when I was at IHS Market, was they immediately moved the two most senior guys from like the iPrio days of IHS Market, James and Harple, onto my team. James ran security architecture for me, and then Harple ran offensive security for me. But they had 25 combined years at IHS Market, at iPrio, at Market itself, and knew all the crazy crap we were going to run into, knew who to talk to, how to get the information out. So it's to everybody's benefit to have that stuff kind of written down. Maybe not everything written down, but how everything works, right? How that sausage is made, to keep using that term. Now I want some sausage.
I know, right?
Wait,
so real quick,
pause.
Real quick, John, let's recap kind of the three key steps of discovery, and then I'm gonna ask you one more question. 3 key steps of discovery: strategic alignment, which we talked about, operational interviews, and then documentation gathering. Docs. You had said something previously that I think is important. I want this to be kind of what we wrap up on, because you talked about managing the output, managing the outcomes. And I think one of the things that has to come out of this assessment, right, is you've got to set the expectations with folks that you're doing this assessment with about what their expected outcomes are. And so for you, at this first phase of this assessment, just the things that we talked about between strategic alignment, operational interviews, document gathering, things like that, what would you set the expected outcomes for the person who's receiving this assessment? What are those expected outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, well, first it's just to kind of verify everything and kind of soften the blow. A lot of times a consultancy engagement ends up shocking people. There's anxiety about it, especially for folks who aren't communicated with, right? This is typically the part where we're actually meeting with the champion, where we're actually, you know, be like, hey, here's what we found out. Did you know about this? And
Yeah.
for the most part, they're like, yeah. But then as we get prepared for like the next pillars, which we'll talk about on other episodes, it's, remembering why we're there, right? Like we get brought in for very specific reasons. Maybe it's, hey, help us like modernize, help us with our first two projects, help us create, maybe it's like even create our first table, whatever that is, it's realigning with that. It's like, did the information that we gather here actually help us, right? And this is where we keep ourselves honest as consultants. And if you're a consultant or thinking about it, again, this is where you need to keep yourself honest. It's especially with me, right? It's very easy to like run around all these different rabbit holes and get super excited and be like, "Ooh, shiny, let's go." But you can't be doing that all the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, did the information that we get first, read it back to the champion, get them prepared for second, third, fourth phases. However, sometimes we do a 3-phase or sometimes we do a 4-phase. I guess you'll have to stay tuned for that. But it's getting ready for that. Make sure that we got the right information to help them with whatever the objective is.
So John, a real-time question. Actually, we got 2 real-time questions that came in. I see Chris over on LinkedIn. I'm going to try to be cognizant of time, but I see your question, Chris. On Twitch, IRL Raptor says, keeping with the discussion, particularly around documentation, if the documentation doesn't exist, should the wheel be reinvented? And then there's a follow-on question there, but answer that first part. If the documentation exists, when do you make that decision about, do you scrap everything? Do you start over from scratch? Like what's that kind of like in your mind when you're looking at something? When do you make that delineation?
Well, he said if the documentation doesn't exist. If he means does it exist? I guess let's just answer it both ways, right? If the documentation doesn't exist, you got to start somewhere, and maybe we change, like we get back with the champion, right? Kind of going back to the question about like, what do we do with the outcome? It could be so jacked up that we're like, hey, I know that you want to build this like super AI space laser, but your foundation absolutely sucks, right? So like we need to actually make this a foundational sort of engagement where we like generate these artifacts, these policies, these procedures. Now, if it does exist and it's just absolutely terrible, I mean, you should expand it as you can. But if it's like real bad and it's inaccurate, then totally redo it. And the second part, and just to answer it real quickly, in a way that matters, to use a consultant's favorite term, it depends, right? Some folks like to have information presented in different ways. Sometimes they want to have like that big giant Visio diagram, what we used to call a PDD, a principal design document at AWS. It would have our internal project, and we wrote those things in internal wikis. It was like kind of, again, the what, the so what, the what next, who's the ideal customer, how are they going to use this, what are the major features, and then they had sections that would dive deep, like showing every little piece of microservice, every piece of tech, every piece of data, every person, every RACI. Maybe you want that sort of documentation, but then some people want kind of like markdown style where it's like just a browse and it's like, hey, okay, we all know what the project is. Here's, I think Splunk did a really good job of this, what you showed me yesterday, the research.splunk.com, kind of having it like that, like here's our detections, here's our data sources, here's the stories, and then kind of sublet everything underneath them. It just really depends. And then, there's other things to the chat about using AI for it. I mean, maybe, but a lot of this stuff is proprietary, and I'm not going to feed some AI model proprietary crap and have it come up with docs.
The it depends thing is always challenging in security, and I'll leave with this on the it depends side, right? And Chris, I'll answer your question over on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, there is a lot of it depends. I think my take on your question, IRL Raptor, is if the documentation doesn't exist, should the wheel be reinvented? I think you have to go back to the goals and the objectives of the assessment, go back to that strategic alignment that we talked about, and be like, okay, is this documentation, to John's point, is it so far off base that, it's an opportunity to reinvent. It's an opportunity to do the right thing or to bring things in alignment. I think you kind of have to, it depends, assess that yourself and make that determination of what's right for your security data strategy, so that you can be successful in that. And so with that being said, Chris over on LinkedIn says, where do we find the one-pager assessment guide? Pay attention to social media. We'll drop it on social media where you can download that one-pager assessment guide. The didn't get done before this stream, so unfortunately we don't have it currently, but pay attention to social media. Reminder, make sure you're following my social media, make sure you're following John's social media, and we'll drop it there. John, we're up for time. We're a little bit over time. It's so good to have you back, buddy. I love sharing the camera with you. This has been educational. It's been fun. Closing thoughts from you, sir.
I hope we could do more of these.
Absolutely. We got 4 more phases to do, buddy. What are you talking about?
I mean, not just the well, I guess like hope we could do more of these. Like, yeah, I'm sure the barrel whites in the marketing void are probably going to be like, oh, he said something bad. We don't want him there.
All right, John.
We don't do more engagements is what I was getting at. That these are fun to do for customers, because at the end of the day, even if it's like they don't end up buying query or whatever, is that we get to leave them with something that's going to help their team moving forward. And I guess to talk about AI, because we have to talk about AI, I think there is some utility. That's one thing that an LLM is very good at, because it is a large language model for the most part, is being able to digest stuff. So if the company sanctions a Copilot, or maybe they're running their own Lambda or Claude, some Anthropic model, maybe they're using Bedrock, I think there is a lot of utility there to dumping out, some of the artifacts that we have. Like, hey, Eli 5 this stuff and make me a rubric. Dumb AI.
Yeah. All right, John, chat. With that being said, I'm going to sign off. We're going to sign off. Everybody have a fantastic day. Thanks for tuning in, as always, across all the platforms. We'll be streaming next week as well. Back in town for the next 3 weeks. We're going to see if we can drag John onto some more shows. We'll see if we can't do some more yapping as well, because I do love chatting with my boy. With that being said, John, I'll see you in actually, I think I'll see you in an hour for the next meeting we have together. Everybody else?
Well, I'll see you back in the green room.
Yeah, exactly. Have a great day.
Yeah, see everybody.
When I step into the ring, I'm like Ivan Drago. I be losing track of time when I'm switching time zones. Not a worry on my mind, lately I've been letting go. Remember when I used to have my wishes, now